Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hi, Rangers. It's me, Jackie Kashian. Welcome to the Dork Forest. It's 2024. Let's do this. Here's the credits, of course. Mike Ruekberg sang that song at the beginning, and he wrote that song, and he sang it with Sarah Cohen, his wife, and he will sing the Mexican hat dance at the end of the program. Also, Patrick Brady, still putting this together. Video, audio, all of it. He's amazing. So, and Vilmos doing JackieKashianStore.com. Squarespace is doing the regular Jackie Kashian page, and I'm thinking of moving the Dork Forest and dorkforest.com away from WordPress because it's driving me nuts. But those are the credits. But if you go to JackieKashian.com, you can get Dork Forest merch. You can get my stand-up merch. You can get my stand-up CDs and DVDs, which you'd have to have devices for those. You can also see videos and find out any number of things. I have another podcast called The Jackie and Laurie Show, but the Dork Forest is the flagship. 18th year. We're doing it, you guys. You can go to my Bandcamp or my YouTube for extra content. Please donate, is what I'm saying. It's 2024, and I think we've been in this long enough. Why don't you guys, everybody send me $100? That's what I'd like you to do. You can PayPal me. There's links all over the pages. You can Venmo me at Jackie Kashian. You can find me at a stand-up show and hand me a sweaty wad of 20s. Do something. But I love doing the show. I would love to make some money, is what I'd like to do. In other news, I'm sure there's more things that I should talk about, but I can't think of them. But let's listen to who's going to dork out about something, because that's my favorite part. Thanks for listening, you guys. You're all great. Let's get into the show. Hey, it's Jackie Kashian. I'm in my garage. Different backdrop. That's right. Turn the laptop around. Very glamorous. Welcome, Rangers, to the Dork Forest. With me is my friend and longtime friend of Andy Ashcraft, Eric Spuur, who wanted to talk about one of the things that he loves the most, and there are so many. He ran the Hero Instant with Andy a couple of weeks ago over at the Gen Con in Indianapolis, tabletop role-playing game that Andy is writing, and hopefully had a good time. Eric Spuur, why don't I let you talk? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jackie. It's really nice to be here.
Yay! Now, here's the thing. Andy's superhero RPG, the Hero Instant, is all well and good. You have a favorite team at this time, or have they always been your favorite kind of team?
Kinda. I mean,
okay.
They were the first thing that I read. The first comic that I ever read with a Marvel team was I got into Rom the Space Knight.
Wow.
In like the 80s.
That's a deep cut.
And there was a crossover with the X-Men. And that was my first exposure to the X-Men. And it just kind of took off from there, my love of comics. But I would say soon after that, I found out about the Legion of Superheroes in DC
Lateral
Comics.
move. DC Comics.
And they really, I loved the Legion. I loved the idea of it, and I loved
what is the idea
their history.
The Legion of Superheroes. Why?
The Legion of Superheroes were essentially a bunch of superpowered teenagers. And they were put together. They're set in the future in the 30th century.
Okay.
And the idea originally was they came out in Adventure Comics in 1958.
Okay.
And it was just supposed to be this one-off sort of issue. It was Adventure Comics, which starred Superboy at the time.
Right.
There was a whole bunch of stories about Superboy, and this was the introduction of the Legion. They come back in time to see their hero from, for them, it's, their ancestor hero, like Superboy.
Tourism?
A little bit, but they took him to the future to basically make him a Legion member, but he had to try out. And he had to go through a couple of tests. And it was just supposed to be a hero worship
What?
sort of thing.
But they made him try out.
They did, but he passed, so it's all good.
Sure. Yeah.
But the comic, the idea, a lot of people loved the issue.
Okay.
So DC Comics at the time was like, well, if they like the Legion, will write more about Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. And so then originally it was just 3 of them, the 3 founders of the Legion.
Okay.
And they're all from different planets. None of them were from Earth. In the 30th century, Earth is just one planet of an organization called the United Planets.
Catchy.
Though the United Planets, they were headquartered on Earth, much like the United Nations.
Right, and much like the Federation. Okay.
Pretty much.
Star Trek, sure.
Right. And so there was Cosmic Boy from Brawl.
Okay.
He had magnetism powers.
Okay.
And there was Saturn Girl from Titan, the moon of Saturn.
She should have been from Saturn? Okay. Oh, the moon. Okay.
She's from the moon, and she had telepathy and mind control and that whole suite.
Okay.
And there was Lightning Boy from Wynneth. He could shoot lightning.
Okay.
And when the Legion became a thing, when they started actually making more comics about it, then they introduced a lot more members. And Lightning Boy got his name changed to Lightning Lad.
Lightning Lad.
Yes, he was only Lightning Boy for the very first issue, and then he was Lightning Lad, and then it was an ongoing joke for years that the Legion, they were all boys, girls, lads, and lasses, pretty much.
Okay.
There was,
because they were the teens, yeah.
Yeah, Triplicate Girl, Bouncing Boy, Colossal Boy, Phantom Girl, Light Lass, Shadow Lass. Yes, there was not a lot of imagination going on when it came to names.
I love a teen team, though. One of these dogs might be trying to get in here. Hang on, 2 shakes. I feared that Tyson, who in the last 5 days has gone blind, was just bumping like a Roomba against the door to this garage. But he is not. I think hopefully Andy kept him inside. I'm so sorry. Bouncing Boy.
Bouncing Boy.
Did he bounce?
Yes.
What was his powers?
He did. Chuck Kane from Earth.
Okay.
He in typical sort of at the time, because this was the 50s, late 50s, early 60s.
Oh, right.
He drank something that he shouldn't have drank.
Right. And all of a sudden, nuclear power.
It gave him powers. He could inflate his body into a ball.
Okay.
And basically bounce around and ricochet off of things. And that was enough to get him into the Legion. There were others who tried out who didn't make it, like Arms Fall Off Boy.
Is that real? That's real.
It is indeed real. It is indeed. He could, and in the most recent, the Suicide Squad.
Right. That movie.
That movie, Nathan Fillion's character was based off of the character in a way from the Legion. Who was a reject. He was a Legion reject. He tried out. He didn't make it. Though Nathan Fillion's character in the movie, his arms could fly through the air. Arms Fall Off Boy did not have the ability. He could just pull his arm off and use it as a weapon.
Wow.
Yes, and then he could reattach it.
Okay, I have to say that if he could, what Nathan Fillion did in the movie, if a guy who can bounce, he would have made the team if he could do flying fists, right? Because that's what he might have been called, Flying Fist Frank. I would like to now make up names. Okay. So Arms Fall Off Boy, not great. Who else?
Not great.
Who else was a reject?
There are a bunch of different rejects. There would occasionally be an issue where there would be Legion tryouts. Now, the Legion had certain rules. They actually had a constitution
Okay.
for their group,
Okay.
and there were certain rules about being a Legionnaire.
Okay.
You had to be at least 18.
Oh,
You had to have
child labor
one.
laws. Okay.
You had to have one intrinsic superpower, not from gear, not from bionics or cyborg or anything. You had to have an
Oh.
intrinsic superhero which you could fully control.
Okay.
Um,
Did that come up?
it did, and I will explain when I talk about the rejects.
Okay.
You had to have, and that power had to be distinct from a distinct superpower from any of the other Legionnaires, except Superboy. For some reason, he was like
Oh.
exempt. It was okay. Like one other person could have super strength, or one other person could be invulnerable.
Maybe because
And
Superboy has all the powers, and then it would just
right,
be a team of one.
exactly.
Okay.
And then the last thing is that you had to be courageous and of good character. And that was part of the whole tryout thing of trying to determine their character. And
Was
some
that
of
also
the
part of the
rejects,
censorship? Was that part of the regulate yourself thing?
maybe
Okay.
I'm not sure, but it could have
Okay.
been. I could see that maybe the Comics Code Authority, might have,
That's it.
they were trying to appease the authority
Right.
at the
Right.
time. Some
So
of the
the
Legion,
reject. Yes.
some of the rejects did turn out to be villains.
Oh.
But some of them actually did turn out to be heroes. Some rejects did eventually become Legionnaires later on.
Okay.
But a bunch of them decided to make their own group called
Yeah.
the Legion of Substitute Heroes. The
Shut up.
subs, as they were
What?
called. Absolutely. There was a whole issue about it, and they would come up because they were just fun characters. Polar
Okay.
Boy, who could emit cold, sort of like
Okay.
Iceman, but he
Right.
didn't have full control over it, and that's why he was rejected.
Got it.
Night Girl had super strength, but only when she was in shadow. She came from a planet that was in perpetual night, and
Okay.
so her
The
father
sun would
gave
take
her
away the.
superpowers, and it wasn't until she got into the light that she realized that her powers didn't work when she was in sunlight.
Okay.
There was Stone Boy, who came from a race that could hibernate. There was I believe there was something about their planet, dangerous storms or something, and so they needed to protect themselves, so they could turn to stone
Oh.
and became completely invulnerable.
Right.
They couldn't move, they couldn't talk, they couldn't do anything.
No.
They were literally
And
a
how-
statue. And
And
so
then
Stone Boy could turn into a statue, but then he was just a statue. And
right.
so that he didn't make the cut.
How did he? Could he also from the inside? Because obviously there's some inner dialogue inside the statue of Stone Boy, saying, "I would like to not be a stone now," and then he would not become a stone again. Is that how?
I would imagine so. I don't
Okay.
know if it was
All
ever
right.
really explained. He's stoned, but I guess he's
It
still
sounds like
conscious somehow.
somehow, and because you have to unstone yourself if
Exactly. He could
right.
unstone himself at will.
Okay. I have to
Uh,
say, what's the writing room on this? Where are they just sitting around going, well, what if if there's going to be auditions, people are going to fail. Who's going to be the failures? What's making them not work out? And then this is my projection. Two episodes later, two flimsies later, they're like, what if they created their own team and it was the substitutes? And then somebody else said, and how about somebody creates a team of the bad guys? Because they're like, well, these guys are losers and we can be A legion of super. Is there such a thing? A legion of
There
super
is
villains?
indeed a legion of supervillains.
Oh,
And the three, they were very much a mirror in some ways to the Legion, in that the three founders were uh, were basically from the same planet as the three founders of the Legion. So
okay,
there was another, Cosmic King was also from the planet Brawl, like Cosmic Boy was, and Cosmic King also had magnetic powers. Um,
okay,
Lightning Lad, he he was born on the planet Wynneth, where most of the kids were born as twins.
okay,
But he and his sister also had a brother who was not a twin, and he was kind of looked down by his society, and so he got very bitter. And so when there was an accident which gave them powers, it gave all three of them powers.
yeah,
And so Garth's brother, uh, I believe he became Lightning Lord, and
okay.
he
Because
was the
kings and
villain.
lords. Okay.
And then there was Saturn Queen,
Oh boy.
who was the enemy telepath. But a
Okay.
lot of the other villains that came up in the comics, they just kind of got grouped together into the Legion of Supervillains, sort of like the Legion of Doom against the Justice League sort of thing.
Right. Well,
They
were they also 18? Were they also teens? Is
uh,
this teen on
they
teen crime? Was this
they
Rumblefish?
they were, though keep in mind the Legion has been around for quite some time, and they were one of the few teams that I've seen where they actually aged, and
Okay.
eventually, some of the members got married, some of them had kids,
Right.
some retired, uh, and there was actually a big thing. It was in 1989, where Keith Giffen, um, and Tom and Mary Burbaum were the writers. They
Okay.
jumped when they took over the comic. They jumped it 5 years into the future,
Okay.
and it became very dark. It was in the
Oh,
80s where everything was
where
all
everything was
dark
dark.
and
Yes.
everything, and so the Legion became dark with it, and it was very grim. This alien race called the Dominators had taken over Earth and the United Planets, and a lot of the Legion had either disappeared or had retired or had kind of formed a resistance.
Okay.
And um, and at that time, a lot of them had become adults,
Right.
and there was a story. A part of the story was the Dominators, because they were, one of the ways of them trying to hold on to power is they supposedly cloned all of the Legion. And so they had a little teenage Legion called the Batch SW6, like stuck away,
Whoa.
which some of the resistance people found. They were still in their tubes and they released them, but it was all the Legionnaires as teenagers.
Right. Because
And so it was this sort of dichotomy of the teenagers seeing their adult selves. It turned out, yeah, the writers decided to do this thing where they weren't actually clones because it's
okay.
comic books, and it
Right.
turned
Right.
out they were from. It was a plot by one of the Legion's big villains called the Time Trapper, who
Okay.
exists at the end of time where everything's destroyed, and for some reason he has it in his head that he needs to kill the Legion. I don't know why. I mean, when at the end of time everybody else is dead, but it's got it.
You'd
The
think he'd
thing
want to hang out with at least three other people.
you think,
Uh,
but he apparently created a little pocket dimension,
mm-hmm.
and the SW6ers were from that,
Oh,
and so
okay.
they were basically from a different. They were just from a different timeline.
Right.
But that
Yeah, it always confuses me whenever supervillains form a group. I always think of them as anarchists and I think loners. I just
yes,
think, working well with others is one of the like key, hey, you're not good at this. I'm going to be a I can only have minions. But so Cosmic Boy, Saturn Girl, and Lightning Boy, were they called boy, lass, lad in the 80s?
They were.
Okay.
They, to a certain degree, after the 5 years later, a lot of them were just referred to by their names.
Okay.
Because it was all gritty. Some of them were
right.
still referred to as their code names, but it's not like it. And in fact, always from the outset of the Legion, none of them had secret identities. Everybody knew who they were, and they were chartered by the United Planets as a sort of peacekeeping law enforcement agency group. They were semi-autonomous. It's not like they completely were under the control of the UP.
Right.
But they were still official.
Right.
And so they kept they did still keep the lad lass boy girl thing going on into the 80s and even into the 90s. The Legion sort of fell out of popularity in I believe the late 80s, and I believe they were canceled. Their comic was canceled, but then the reboots started. Now, I think I'm not a comic historian, so I can't say for sure. I think the Legion has gone through more like complete reboots than any superhero in mainstream comics. Certainly in Marvel and DC. They got so DC, much like Marvel, they'll have these big events that will change everything, but not necessarily really change everything.
Crossovers, man. Crossovers.
Yeah. DC, more than Marvel, has really done the whole cosmic thing. They did a thing in the 80s called Crisis on Infinite Earths, where they got rid of the multiverse, and it was just sort of one Earth after that. But that, eventually was undone, and the multiverse was brought back. And so they would occasionally have these big cosmic events that would sort of rewrite history. And in the 90s, in 1994, DC had a big event called 0 Hour, which wiped out everything. And so everything was rebooted. And so that was the first reboot of the Legion, where they were back to being kids. Now, instead of sort of spontaneously becoming a group, now it was the history of the Age of Heroes with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. This financier, R.J. Brand, the richest man in the galaxy. He's always been kind of behind the Legion, even in the first iteration. The second iteration, it was he loved history, and specifically the heroic age, with stories about Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. It's all in the history books for him, and he wanted to bring that back. So when our three heroes, the founders of the Legion, saved his life, he decided to finance them as a team.
Is it still set in the 30th?
It is still set in the 30th century. It doesn't get switched to the 31st century until we went into the 21st century. So it's always kind of 10 centuries into the future.
But
the Legion now, while it had similarities, the first reboot had similarities to the first iteration. They kind of got rid of the lads and lasses and boys and girls. Lightning Lad became Livewire. Phantom Girl became Apparition. Triplicate Girl became Triad, etc. So they mixed it up a little bit. They reintroduced characters with slightly different histories, changing some ethnicities. And introducing new characters, new Legionnaires from more non-human looking aliens. You know how the original Star Trek problem of most of the aliens looked human. With,
Right.
they changed the nose a little bit, or they put
Well, it's all an
antennae and
analogy for racism, and so I get it.
right.
And I do like that they found uh, the rest of the crayon box, though. Good for them.
They did.
That's good.
And so this first reboot of the Legion, they had a few more characters that were obviously non-human.
Okay.
There was one of their members called Gates who could teleport, and he looked very insectoid.
Okay.
That sort of thing. Well, that reboot lasted about 10 years.
And this is the one from the 90s?
This is the one from the 90s. It didn't. Go ahead.
Okay. Can I ask? We're going to get back to the reboot of the 90s,
Okay.
but here I have some history. Have you read the sort of the originals, or at least synopses of the originals from the 50s? Do you know like what those stories were? Do you remember?
I read a lot of the ones from the 50s.
Yeah.
They weren't written very well.
No. I was
right.
going to
So
ask if they were cheerful,
read,
like Archie. I mean, were they sort of heroic teen?
They were very heroic. They were. I wouldn't say that they were like Archie.
Okay.
But it was very much similar to the DC comics of the time, where heroes were heroes and they always won, and they were always righteous and courageous and the best of us.
Right. Yeah.
And so it was always very, when people are nostalgic about what they think the 1950s was, where everything was simpler, even though it really wasn't
at all.
In the comics, it very much was that. It was
Right.
It was a very simpler time. The plots were written very straightforward. There weren't, a lot of characters with hidden agendas, or oh, this person is actually a double agent, or and is stealing secrets from the Legion. It was always often very much a one issue. Here are the good guys. We introduce the bad guy. Bad guy seems to win. Good guys come through in the end, and it's done.
That guy goes to jail.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I love it. This is Maria Bamford does a joke about that. Richard Scarry, Busy Town. That's one of the things she loves about that children's book, because there's no backstory. In the fact you're just like he's just the taxi driver. There's no secondary level. But so in the 80s, here's my second question. So in the 80s, with the addition of the Grimm, is this when they all got sort of, they have sort of backstories, and they more complex characters were introduced into their lives?
Way more. It wasn't completely in the 80s that happened. As time went on, more complicated stories were added. 60s, in the 70s, certainly they attempted to handle racism in a way very badly. They introduced.
Oh Christ! I can just imagine.
They introduced their first black member.
Yes.
To the Legion. His name, his code name was Tyrock, and he was introduced in 1976. 1976. Apparently, Jim Shooter. I read that Jim Shooter, who was editor of DC Comics in the 60s, he wanted to introduce a black character to the Legion, but was constantly shot down by leadership. But in the 70s, the editor at the time, I don't remember his name, but he greenlit a black character. But the black character was like so stereotypical of racism of the time that he was this angry black man who was from a society that was essentially racial separatist. So apparently the origin of Tyrock is that in the 18th century, some slaves off the coast of Africa, I think maybe the ship got marooned on this
Okay.
island off the coast of Africa, and the slaves survived, and they basically created a society for themselves. But this island was special, that
Okay.
it was sort of like a Brigadoon, sort of. It would vanish. It would vanish for years.
I can't tell you how terrified as this story goes on of what the next plot twist is going to be. But I
And
think it's going to be safe. It's Eric Spuur, you guys. It's going to be fine. Go ahead.
Every few years, apparently, this island would reappear. But in the meantime, the descendants of these
Yes.
slaves, they managed to build this super by the
Wakanda?
30th century.
Wakanda?
Essentially, by the
Okay.
30th century, they have built this super technological culture and society on this island, but they want to keep to themselves. And the Legion, it pops up in the 30th century, and the Legion goes to investigate. And Tyrock is their defender, and he immediately attacks them.
Sure.
But
Oh, he's the bad guy?
he's the bad guy. But
Oh.
in the typical hero versus hero thing, they first fight, and then they realize that they're both on the same side, sort of
Okay.
thing. And so
Yeah.
they invited Tyrock to join the Legion, and he initially turned them down, but
Mhm.
he kind of became a member eventually. But he was also drawn, the artist Mike Grell, who was tasked with drawing Tyrock, hated the character, absolutely hated
Wow.
the character. And so he gave him the most ridiculous outfit and look ever. He has this big fro.
What is the name of this bad person? What is the name of the artist again?
Mike Grell. He's a great artist. And
How do you spell his last name?
Grell.
I will be looking this up, and we're gonna take back the night, you guys. We're gonna make Tyrock into a hero. I'm gonna write this comic book. He's gonna Black Panther this thing. It's gonna be amazing.
He had his outfit. Mike Grell said that he kind of patterned his outfit after Elvis Presley. So he had this sleeveless white top with a high white collar.
Sure.
It was open at the chest, a big V down the chest, showing his manly chest with these silver chains coming across, and this belt. And then basically it ends kind of in a white Speedo.
Okay.
And he had little white gloves and tiny little white boots.
The boots and the gloves a lot, but prior to that, you had me. I was like, I don't mind that outfit.
It's very, very disco 70s.
Right. But
crazy.
Wasn't it 1974? Did you say? What was it?
76.
Oh, see, then I'm gonna say Mike Grell. That's okay. Just because he dressed him in the coolest outfit of 1976, I say. But now you look back at it, yes.
He got vindicated because after that 5-year gap where everything got dark.
Yeah.
I believe once the Legion got rid of the Dominators and freed Earth, Tyrock, I believe his actual name was Troy Stewart.
Okay.
He was elected president of the United Planets. So, he became the president.
What were his superpowers, Tyrock's?
He had a sonic scream,
Black Bolt,
that could warp reality.
Wow.
Depending upon how his intonation, depending upon what he screamed, it could do different things.
Okay.
And it was basically a catch-all. He could almost do anything. It's basically what the writers wanted him to. But he's documented to have a scream, to make things burst into flame, give him telekinesis, make force fields, manipulate the weather, manipulate plants, teleport. it was all over the place, and it was done
It's
by
like the
different
Green Lantern's
streams.
green or something, like his
Yes.
ring, except for that it's
Yeah.
a scream, and it actually affects reality as opposed to the ring turning into something. If I
Yeah.
know what the ring does, I don't know a lot about the Green Lantern, though I've done 2 episodes about the Dork Forest about the Green Lantern.
Green Lantern is another one of those things where he can't completely control reality, but
pretty close.
over time, he's able to do more and more things with the ring. So, he can't necessarily teleport with the ring, but maybe he could make a device that could cause him to teleport, sort of thing. It's one of those nebulous sort of, what do we want him to be able to do things.
Right. Was the game master going to allow it? Is the writer going to create a plausible deniability? Okay, so we're in the 30th, and so this is this history is fascinating. Now we can jump back to the 90s, or you can just move forward from 1974 again.
Well, we'll jump to the 90s.
Okay, the reboot.
After the first reboot, that lasted a while, but then I'm not sure why, but in 2004, just 10 years later, they decided to reboot the Legion again.
Okay.
And this time, now the first reboot was helmed by Mark Waid.
Oh wow.
Was behind...
There's an episode of the Dork Forest about with Mark Waid. Feel free to go back and listen to that, people. Okay.
He also helmed the second reboot, which became known as the 3-boot, because it's the third iteration. And in this iteration, they did something a bit different in that now the United Planets is a very sort of rigid, lawful, everybody has their place, we cannot have any dissent sort of society. And the Legion are essentially teenagers who decided, well, screw that. We want
a party.
We don't have any power, but we're gonna take back some power. And so they were very much a kind of rebellion, not a violent rebellion, but more like, we're not going to do what you want. We're going to do what we want, sort of thing.
What did they want?
And they wanted freedom.
Did they want to dance like Footloose?
Quite possibly. And they were very much, this Legion was designed more like for years, adults have, in the media, teenagers have been portrayed as, these rebels, these teenage rebels who just, they go out and they do what they want to do, and they listen to their strange music, and they, dance their strange dances and that sort of thing. In that sort of idea, taken into the future, where the future is so regimented, pretty much anybody wanting to do art that, or dance or make music that isn't approved by the censors is a rebel. And it is very much in that's the sort of rebellion. It's more of we deserve to have rights. We deserve to have a seat at the table. And if you won't let us, we're going to stand up. We're going to stand up, and we're going to say, no, we are going to help even if you don't want us to help.
That's it.
And that was sort of the attitude of this second reboot. Of the time. Unfortunately, that reboot lasted even less time than the second one.
2004 to what? Like 2006?
2007.
Oh no, 3 years.
2007. It's a little hazy because in 2007 there was a little miniseries called Superman and the Legion of Superheroes.
Okay.
It was written by Jeff Johns and illustrated and drawn by Gary Frank. It was beautiful. I have the graphic novel for it.
Oh, wow.
And it was a throwback to the first iteration of the Legion, where Superman has forgotten about his friends in the Legion, who are at this point adults, and they come back and they need his help. And so he goes into the future, and those Legionnaires are not quite the same as the ones in the first iteration of the Legion, but it's close. Right. It has the same feel.
Okay.
But then they're in this little miniseries, but this 3-boot Legion is still going on, and there's an event that basically kind of deletes them. It's like, okay, we're not they're not going to be around anymore, and then 2009 is when this sort of 2.5 reboot gets their own comic. And it is the in some places on the internet they call it the retro boot, because they're going back to the first Legion, but they're all adults.
And they get their own comic?
They got their own comic.
Okay. Yep. Who's in this team?
It is
Is it 3 still?
There's a lot of the Legionnaires from the original team are there just as adults, though some of the substitute heroes are now Legionnaires. So there's still Cosmic Boy and Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl. They're still the leaders. Polar Boy has now become a Legionnaire. I believe so has Night Girl. Some of them have died. And they also get a few new recruits in this sort of 2.5, this retro boot.
So it's a much bigger team, though.
They max out. I think they maxed out in the 20s. I sort of 24, 25 members. I think at their max. I don't know at this point if they were still at about that point, but certainly they were over a dozen. Somewhere between 12 and 20 at the very least at this point. But then that only lasted a few years. I think the comic was 2-3 years, and then it got canceled.
2009 to 2011 or so?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
do you have those? Were those pretty good?
I think I'm missing one of the graphic novels from that era, but I do have a couple.
What do you like about them? Is it the fact that they're teen superheroes? Andy enjoys a teen superhero team with the power of the sun, and sometimes they're powered by the sun.
I like, to a certain extent, I like their optimism.
Okay.
Sort of that Star Trek. The future is going to be okay. The future is going to be good. And
there is going to be a future. That does help. It's much
there is
better
going
than
to be a future.
Terminator, yes.
And we do survive, and we do sort of join this galactic community. And while things are not smooth by any means, because it's a superhero comic and you have to have conflict, I liked the idea of these heroes coming together as representatives of their planets to say, yeah, things are pretty good, and we're going to step up, and we're going to try to make sure that the future keeps going.
That's interesting. I like that. That's why sort of super futuristic, because a lot of the superhero comics I read are either supposedly take place in the present, in an alternate present, where they try to fight the good fight here. But to think about something set in the 30th, that is kind of cool. That there's still people, that there's still planets, that we've expanded out and met other species and races, and they didn't just murder us, or we didn't just murder them, and we're not all just pets. So,
right.
Yes. Okay. I
But
love
there's
that.
one reboot left to go.
Oh, really? All right. Well, you
Yes.
have 20 minutes, my friend.
Okay.
Yay.
Well,
It's
the last reboot so far happened
okay.
in 2019.
Okay.
That one was headed up by Brian Michael Bendis.
Okay.
And the artist Ryan Sook.
How do you spell
and
Sook?
Sook.
Okay.
And this time they changed something. Now, the other legions were very much linked to one of Superman's sort of family. For the most part, it was him. There was Superboy and the Legion of
Right.
Superheroes, and then Superman had his friends in the Legion. In one of the reboots, instead of it being Superboy, because by that point DC had changed things where that Superman was never Superboy.
There was an additional Superboy. Yes.
When he was a kid, he was never Superboy. It was only when he became an adult he became Superman. So there was never, they sort of got rid of the Superboy thing in Superman's past. So they couldn't have the Legion linked to Superboy. Instead, they linked it to Supergirl.
Oh, okay.
That in the 3 boot, that was the ones that were very much the rebels. They came into the past and asked Supergirl to become a Legionnaire, which she was in the original Legion as well, but in this one they sort of got rid of the Superboy angle.
Okay.
Well, with the most recent reboot, they had a plot line in Action Comics where Superman and his son, John Kent, who sort of was the new Superboy for a while, but then became now he's sort of another Superman. He's an adult.
I'm so glad he didn't go bad. I don't want Superman to go bad.
No,
and does I have to stop you very quickly just to ask about John Kent? Is John Kent did Lois Lane? Did they? Spoiler alert! Is it their kid?
If I remember correctly, it is their kid. There was shenanigans, as there usually are in the comics, to explain that for some time, I think Superman and Lois Lane were trapped in another dimension for a while. And
that's why he's of age.
She gave birth to John, and when they came back, he was a kid already.
There was some Captain American son that happened in another universe as well.
Right.
So
right.
John Kent has superpowers and is a Superman at this time in canon. Okay.
But he was also a Superboy for a time.
Okay.
And with his father in Action Comics, they sort of started the United Planets. They sort of diplomatically got together with a bunch of aliens, I think, because Superman was tired. I haven't read it, but I'm just sort of guessing that maybe Superman got tired that the Earth keeps getting freaking invaded by aliens. And so it's kind of, hey, why don't we, make friends with aliens and have a sort of a mutual defense sort of thing. And because this was the sort of origin of the United Planets, all of a sudden, in this sort of ceremony where Superman and his son Superboy are meeting with these aliens, the Legion shows up using a time travel device they have called the Time Sphere, and they are inviting John Kent into the future, that Superboy, into the future to become a Legionnaire, and that was the start of the most recent Superboy and the Legion comic, which I do have. There's 2 graphic novels. I really wish it had lasted longer. They do a nice job with it. They introduced some interesting concepts, and they changed a few things from sort of classic Legion lore. So R.J. Brand is now not this industrialist. Instead, R.J. Brand is the president of the United Planets.
Okay.
and she has given somewhat her permission for the Legion to be created, and it's an
And
interesting
RJ Brain
comic.
can be a woman.
And
Yeah.
in fact, she is feminine presenting. She's from a race called the Durlans, who are shapeshifters.
Okay.
And her son, Chameleon, his code name is Chameleon. Her son is a member
Yep.
of the Legion.
Okay.
And so, with shapeshifters, it's hard to say. She's, is she
Oh, sure.
is she feminine? Is she masculine? She could be both. She could be
Right.
either. She could change. But
She has
certainly in
chosen
the
to
comic,
present binary.
yeah,
There we go.
yes.
And and there's only 2 graphic novels so if someone wanted to read it, it's finished.
It is finished,
run?
unfortunately. Okay. I don't know if it was canceled or whether or not it was just always meant to. I believe it's just 12 issues, so they collected it into
2 sixes.
Yeah. But I thought it was an interesting read.
Good.
And
how did Bendis end it? Was there a nice button on it, or did he bring it back to 0? What did he do? Do you know?
It ends. He does end sort of one of his main plot lines of the time. There was, this arc, and they defeat the villain. There are still some lingering plot lines which are not resolved.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that he introduced in this, there are no Green Lanterns at the time in this. But
Space Cops.
There
Those
is
are Space
one
Cops, right? Yeah.
Gold Lantern.
Oh.
And he joins the Legion, and supposedly the Guardians of the Universe have sort of perfected their rings and created the Gold Lantern ring, and created the one Gold Lantern so far to create it. And it's determined by sort of the Legion's sort of Tony Stark super intelligent member. His name is Brainiac 5.
Okay.
He tells the Gold Lantern he's pretty sure the Guardians of the Universe, they're not really the Guardians of the Universe. So it kind of leaves that plot line, wow, who's really behind the Gold Lanterns then? But we may never know, because the story doesn't continue on from there.
Right. It's interesting about Bendis. Do you think, because he often does that, I think, in his writings, where he'll leave something where he's like, I'm leaving this for someone else to write, if they would like a writer's prompt. But then there's other writers who insist on putting all the toys back in the box, right? And saying, start over from 0. You write whatever you want. But I feel like Bendis is like, you want to make something with that? You help yourself. And that's kind of cool. I think that's kind of interesting.
It could also be that he had planned.
Oh, right.
I'm not sure.
And it just got shut down.
It could be the comic was just canceled. I'm not sure. I didn't find out whether or not it was actually planned to be 12 issues or whether or not it was canceled. So it's possible he was planning to explore it more and just didn't get a chance.
Right. And it's interesting because when I hear the name Brian Michael Bendis, I always think, well, that guy can write his own ticket to some extent, because he feels like he's kind of, I feel like he has no superpower, and it's, what do you want to write next, Brian Michael Bendis?
It does feel like that sometimes with certain writers, him one of them. I feel like Jeff Johns also, like if he wants to do something,
it feels like
he's got a good enough track record. I think Mark Waid too. Yeah.
Right. I think Gail Simone and
absolutely
Kelly
Gail
Sue DeConnick.
Simone. Yes.
Yeah. And maybe Kimberly Clarkson? Can't remember her last name. Can't remember any of her name. Guess what? Kimberly Clarkson may not be a real name. Kimberly Clark is a stand-up comic. Find her. She's very funny. Anyway.
And Kelly Clarkson is a singer.
And Kelly Clarkson is a singer. So is there currently a Legion out there? Is there?
There is not currently a Legion comic. They have made recently a animated movie called The Legion of Superheroes, which came out 2-3 years ago, I want to say. And it was
What's that on?
Supergirl.
Okay.
It's just an animated movie. It's probably on Max if you wanted to find it,
Okay.
or you could
Yep.
probably buy a DVD of
Right,
it.
or not Crunchyroll, probably Max.
Not Crunchyroll. I don't think
Okay.
Crunchyroll, because it's not an anime. It's
Right,
just
it's
just an
a
animated
cartoon.
movie. It's one of
Yeah.
DC's animated movies, and that was Supergirl going to the future and sort of trying to join the Legion, and then finding out about a plot against the Legion and the United Planets and helping take it down. It was all right.
Okay.
They made some changes, but it was all right.
Right. So that's from like 2021 or something. Movie.
I think so, something like that.
And when did Bendis end the last run? Was that a year or so ago too, or?
Well, it started in 2019, so it probably, since it only ran for 12 issues, it
6.
probably ended in 2020.
Yeah. Okay. So they're due. They're due to come back.
They are due. I really hope they bring the Legion back, and if they want to reboot them again, it's like, all right, if they've got an interesting concept, I'm down.
I mean, that's the thing if you have a teen superhero, you have to reboot a lot because of the aging process. You just have to, I think. And because you keep people little, it's The Simpsons and it's 30 years later, and I'm like, I think you've covered this. Okay. So but I will say, what are there stories that you'd like to see that you haven't seen yet, or are there favorite episodes, favorite issues?
I wish the Legion I wish they'd let the Legion stick around long enough for, like what happened in the original Legion, that they had relationships. They had
They did
and
age.
and those relationships actually went somewhere. As I feel like some writers, I think Joss Whedon has quoted something like, if two people are going to get together, he's going to break them up, in, one or two issues, or one or two episodes, something like that. Whenever there was, he talked about not liking a couple being comfortable, like not having a stable relationship. And I like the idea of stable relationships. I liked in the past that
I think it's a lot harder to write that.
Stable relationships in the Legion. Lightning Lad, Garth, and Imra Ardeen, Saturn Girl, they got married.
Okay.
They had 2 kids.
Yeah.
They had twins because of Garth. Their children are always twins, and so they had a couple of boys.
Right.
And they had issues. I'm not saying that, there was some drama in the relationship, but they got through it.
Yeah.
And I liked seeing that. Similar to like Superman and Lois Lane. I like the fact that they have a kid now. I think that's interesting. I think they have a stable relationship. You can show that they have a stable relationship and they have children. And I like the idea of legacies that DC used to lean into more than they do now, in the sense that the original heroes would retire or die, and younger generations would take over. DC kind of muddled that over the years because they kept bringing the old heroes back, and it's just kind of like, let them rest, for crying out loud.
Yes.
So I like the idea of a lineage, a legacy, and I liked in the original Legion that they allowed for some of that, and it would be nice to be able to see that again, but they'd have to be around for a couple of decades, and the most recent reboots, they don't last very long, and they aren't given that time.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting, because I think what I was thinking was that how hard it is to write sort of a couple that's comfortable with themselves fighting even if you look at The Incredibles, the movie The Incredibles, they had actual things that they had to deal with, but they had a real nice relationship. They had an actual, and they were based on the Fantastic Four, right?
Right.
Which is a real relationship that's lasted forever. And I do actually, I've never been able to read Fantastic Four until recently. Dan Slott wrote, and I think we've been reading it now for about 2 years or so. And there was a line in it in one of the first ones where he said, we're not a superhero team, we're a family. So it's fine. We work as a team, but we're not, we're not recruiting. It's not So I love that. And I think it is kind of harder. There's an Australian murder mystery show that I think only has 13 episodes, but it's called Mr. and Mrs. Murder. And Mr. and Mrs. Murder is about a couple who does cleanup after murders, right? They do and they, of course, guess what, you guys? They solve the murders. Anyway.
How about that?
But Mr. and Mrs. Murder, such a good show. Just because they they do have superpowers in the fact that they solve all the murders, and they are also very thorough in their cleanliness. And but I love that. I love that being the idea. That's awesome. Eric Spuur, you're on the internet, but you're not plugging anything, so we're just friends. Yeah. You have been my guest on the Dork Forest. And amazing. I've always said this about Andy Ashcraft's friends. All of them could do at least 3 episodes. Well, this is the first one you've done, and Robert Hurd has done at least 4, I believe. So Eric Spuur, you guys, he's great.
I'd love to talk about the Green Lantern Corps and all the other Lantern Corps. I have my tattoos, of the Lantern Corps. So I'd love to do an episode about that, but that can be later.
That could be, yes. We'll do it. Well, you'll get in the rotation. It's a very, and I don't do a lot of DC episodes, so this will help all of the Rangers of the Dork Forest who love the DC so much. So thank you for being on the show, Eric Spuur. And Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other. Sometimes there's just an extra part that I just want to record. What is Fortress Lad?
Fortress Lad. Yes.
Eric.
So the original Legion of Superheroes Clubhouse, where they were based. Yeah, they called it Clubhouse. Were they eating honeycombs?
Were they eating honeycombs in there?
Not that I know of. It was the way that it was drawn. It looked like an old sort of 1950s sci-fi rocket, bright yellow, and it looked like it had been buried into the ground. So it was this yellow cylinder with these red fins around the top, like this rocket had sort of embedded itself into the ground. And that was the first Legion Clubhouse in let's see, what year was it?
Lad?
It was 1989. In some sort of secret origin comic, they decided to write the origin of the Legion Clubhouse. And during tryouts, this kid who named himself Fortress Lad stepped forward, and what he could do, and he looked like a yellow humanoid, bald, a little wrinkly face, but his torso was this yellow cylinder with the red fins. And his power is he could turn into a fortress. He turned into the clubhouse. What would be the clubhouse? That was his power. But he couldn't move.
No!
He just basically could turn into a building. And so he was rejected. Well, one of the other rejects, her name was Mnemonic Kid. Mnemonic, she could had telepathic powers, and she could manipulate memories. Mnemonic Kid, and she was rejected, and she was so pissed. She went to She was trying to get people to go up against the Legion with her, and she went to Fortress Lad to convince him to team up with her against the Legion. She was going to wipe out the memories of the Legionnaires so they forgot that they had superpowers.
Okay.
And Fortress Lad was like, oh, hell no. And so he totally turned her down and was going to turn her into the Legion when she decided to attack the Legion. And he jumped in the way of her blasts and turned into a fortress to protect the Legionnaires. And so she kept using her powers on Fortress Lad, but he would not
Wouldn't stop.
get out of the way.
Yep.
He had turned into his fortress, and she used the power on him so much that he lost all of his memories. And he was just the fortress. He became a building, and that was the origin of the fortress. Now, it apparently didn't completely protect the Legionnaires. Their memories of Fortress Lad were wiped out.
Oh,
so
yeah. They're living inside Fortress Lad now.
Right. So
you just spilled a Slurpee on Fortress Lad's carpeting.
So they'd completely forgotten about Fortress Lad, but then they found themselves with this building, and they decided to make it their clubhouse because they felt like
it belonged.
That it belonged and that it was there to protect them.
Aww.
And Mnemonic Kid met a grisly end because when she realized that when her powers weren't working, she decided to throw a grenade at Fortress Lad in order to blow her way inside, but it rebounded and blew up and killed her.
So it was suicide by cop.
You got to be careful with those grenades.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
And so that was the origin, the crazy origin of the Legion Clubhouse, Fortress Lad. Yeah.
Okay, I have got to end it there. It's the way it goes. And then I'm going to do an extra thing with Andy, too. So you'll hear this 3 times, Rangers. You know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
Hi, Adal. How was the show?
It was so fun. I've trapped you into doing this bonus immediately afterwards because we spent the day with Eric Spuur. And
we had a nice time.
We had a very nice time doing an escape room.
An escape room with him and some other friends. And for another friend's birthday, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Judy Adler. You have to come on the show too.
She does.
Yeah. I told Eric this. All of your original friends from could all be on the show at least 4 times.
All my friends.
And so Eric Spuur spoke of the Legion of Superheroes.
He did, and he does.
And he does he just in conversation as well? Does he just bring it up?
Sometimes.
So we talked for an hour, and then he started, after I stopped recording, he started another story. And I was like, pardon me. I hit record again. But we're not doing I will only there's not a lot of people I can do it, but it was so funny. It was just about Fortress Lad and the Legion of Superheroes Fortress and how it was created.
Right.
So
Fortress Lad was a spaceship. It could turn into a spaceship. And then they lost the ability to turn into a spaceship, or lost the ability to not be a spaceship, and then they just used him as a spaceship.
Right, but they luckily, because of mnemonic lass, the fact that that's in your brain box, the fact that you know that is a story that
I only recently learned that story, actually.
Well, thank God, because why would you have not told me that story before, my love?
I know. Well, it's such a horrific story.
Well, but mnemonic glass made them forget that he was an actual boy. And they were like, someone left this fortress, and it feels
which is even worse.
Right.
That makes it even more tragic.
Oh my God. I starred so many different things for for there to be clips and stuff. And I only make one clip because I was told by social media, just make one. And I'm like, but
there's so many.
I know but my favorite clip I think is going to be when Eric said that the thing he loves about super futuristic teen superhero team is that there's going to be a future.
And a pretty rosy colored one in that.
Right.
Because, we've made friends across the galaxy. There's a federation of planets.
Right. There's a constitution.
There's government across planets. People are criminals, and teenagers can be superheroes.
Right.
And you have to stop being a superhero. You can't be a part of the Legion as soon as you turn 20.
Oh, well, and he said it's not really a problem because they keep rebooting it before anybody turns 20.
It's true.
And what he wants is, because there was once when it was 10 years when they had children and they got married and they kind of turned into the Fantastic Four.
Kind of.
Where they were a family. And I think that those stories are harder to write. That was my
yeah,
pit.
I mean, when
I want to
got
brag about that.
40 and 50-year-old men writing stories about being teenagers.
Yes.
Things are...
But you'd think 40 and 50-year-old men could write about their happy marriages. Wait a minute.
They say, write what you know.
Right. Though I might pick as because he told me about Tyrock, the first black member of the Legion of Superheroes, and written by drawn by Mike Grell.
Okay.
And Mike, because it came out in 1976. He was a disco guy. He was like Power Man, he was wearing a white, and then but white gloves and white booties, but he was like the king, or he was the hero of a Wakandan-like Brigadoon island. Of a slave ship that crashed. Yeah.
Good Lord.
Right. The story just gets weirder and weirder. Anyway, it's a great episode, and I am so glad that Eric Spuur wanted to come on.
Well, good. I am glad.
It was super fun. And for the third time, Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat. My hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?